You're watching Around the World, our top global stories. First up, it's the biggest strike by people in the United Kingdom in more than a decade. More than 500,000 people took to the streets, from school teachers to bus drivers, all of them demanding better pay, pension and working conditions. Empty train stations, barriers and closed signboards reminiscent of COVID lockdowns. Paralyzed train services, closed schools and hundreds marching through central London. After years of brutal pay cuts, nurses, teachers and millions of public servants have seen their living standards getting decimated in Britain, and they clearly have had enough of it. So they staged a walkout. The strike was called Walkout Wednesday. The last time the country saw mass walkouts on this scale was back in 2011, when over 1 million public sector workers staged a one-day strike in a dispute over pensions. With a call from the Federation of Trade Unions, millions of workers, including teachers, university staff, civil servants, border officials, and train and bus drivers walked out of their jobs across the United Kingdom. Locals in cars beeped their horns and raised fists in solidarity with them as they drove past the protesters. Britons have endured months of disruptions to their daily life due to the recent spate of strikes, as a bitter dispute over pay and work conditions drags on between the unions and the UK government. With inflation running at more than 10%, the highest in about 4 decades, protesters feel these fresh strikes in the recent months are justified. Unions say that despite some pay increases, public sector workers have been plunged into financial difficulty. The wages have simply failed to keep pace with the soaring inflation. According to the National Education Union of the UK, around 23,000 schools have been affected, with an estimated 85% of them shutting down fully or partially. Official government data showed that more days were lost to industrial action from the months of June to November 2022 than in any 6-month period in the past 30 years. The strikes may have a political impact on the United Kingdom's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's government. That says giving in to the demands would only fuel inflation further. PM Sunak has also introduced a draft law requiring frontline workers to maintain a minimum level of service during walkouts, which he says is in line with other European nations. Unions have warned of more strikes in the coming days and weeks if their demands are not met with. Moving on. Even as US Secretary of State Antony Blinken appealed for peace and de-escalation of violence between Israel and Palestine, it looks like nobody is blinking in West Asia. Just hours after Blinken left Palestine, Israeli jets carried out an airstrike on what it called was a rocket production workshop in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military said that the workshop was run by the militant Hamas group which controls Gaza. The latest airstrike was conducted after the Israeli army claimed that its air defenses intercepted a rocket from Palestinian territory. The exchange has further escalated tensions during a particularly violent period in the long-running conflict. Even as the US is focused on de-escalating the recent violence between Israel and Palestine, almost 24 people have been killed over the past 1 week alone. Fortunately, there is no report of casualties from the Gaza rocket attack or the Israeli airstrike so far. Moving on, the British monarch is technically Australia's head of state, although these days that role is largely symbolic. And now, Australia is cutting down its ties with the British monarchy. King Charles III will not feature on Australia's new $5 bill. The country's central bank's move is signalling a phasing out of the British monarchy from Australian banknotes, although he is still expected to feature on its coins. A new indigenous design will replace the previous portrait of the late Queen Elizabeth II to honour the culture and history of the first indigenous Australians.
I think this is the right decision come to for the right reasons. I welcome the decision taken by the Independent Reserve Bank to ensure that the new $5 note recognises and celebrates the culture and history and heritage of Indigenous Australians.
Australia's $5 bill is the only banknote in the country to feature the monarch. The bank plans to consult with the Indigenous groups in designing the new bill, and it will be years before it goes public. The current Australian $5 bill will continue to be issued until the new design is introduced and will remain legal tender. The face of King Charles III is expected to be seen on Australian coins later this year. Like many former British colonies, Australia is debating to what extent it should retain its constitutional ties to Britain. Up next, we take you all the way to Antarctica, the South Pole, where researchers are now digging deep, looking for the oldest ice in the world. And they aim to analyze 1.5 million years of Earth's life through ice core drilling. In Antarctica, the mission Beyond Epica, Oldest Ice, has just concluded its second ice drilling campaign. European researchers working for Beyond Epica said they've reached 2,600 feet deep into the ice. Glaciologists are aiming at reaching a depth of 2,700 meters, where they expect to find ice that is 1.5 million years old. The samples are meant to help study climate change. The ice collected gives scientists elements to analyze the temperatures and greenhouse gases that were in existence around 50,000 years ago on the planet. The European Commission has pumped in 11 million euros of funding for this project, apart from other countries sponsoring the mission, including main partners France and Italy. The study, underway since the year 2019, will last 7 years. And finally, the Beatles, the iconic rock and roll band's lead singer, Paul McCartney, is back in the spotlight. A trove of previously unseen photos taken by McCartney as the Beatles shot to global stardom in the 1960s is now set to go on display at a gallery in London this year. The pictures cover a brief but transformative time for the Beatles. The time when the Beatles went from a sensational music act in the UK to a worldwide rock and roll phenomenon. Mainly their breakthrough to the US, including the historic appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show. The exhibition, titled Paul McCartney Photographs 1963 to 64, Eyes of the Storm, opens on the 28th of June this year, and a companion book will also be released 2 weeks before that. The book, 1964 Eyes of the Storm, will include nearly 300 of McCartney's photographs taken across 6 cities: Liverpool, London, Paris, New York, Washington, D.C. and Miami, and many never-before-seen portraits of other Beatles band members: John Lennon, George Harrison and Ringo Starr. McCartney approached the London Gallery in the year 2020 after he rediscovered a batch of photos that he thought were lost. And with that, we've completely run out of time here on this edition of Around the World. Thank you so much for watching. Keep it with News 9+.